Hello to all of my Substack subscribers to Fool's Gold, Confessions from an Educated Fool. It's, Donald Earl Collins again. Whether you're paying or not paying, thank you for being part of this. I know I haven't done a posting in a couple of weeks. Thanksgiving, lots of grading, lots of writing on other topics that are not necessarily related to the topics I'm writing on the Substack, among other things. So I'm sorry that I've been infrequent. I've been pretty consistent for the first year, but these last few weeks have been hard. As I said in my previous Substack. So I want to talk a little bit about gold-plated shit of peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles being so-called gold standards in academia and what are all those things it relates to. I say pretty much everything I want to say. I just want to add a couple of things, right? One is the fact that it's all about gatekeeping and who can and can't be part of the club. I don't cover everything, right? For example, I know for a fact that, and I've talked about this in other Substacks where, the vast majority, somewhere near 80% of those who are published in the major journals in any field, doesn't matter if it's astrophysics or zoology, doesn't matter if it's history or education or English or ethnic studies, are folks who have gone to and or teach at elite institutions. And I mean like the top elite institutions in their field. So it doesn't necessarily always mean Ivy Leagues, which typically that would be regardless of field, but it does mean the top elite universities within fields like history, which can include public elite institutions like University of Virginia, University of Michigan, University of California, Berkeley, UCLA, and so on, right? And so, you put that together with, oh, I have a job at one of these places, or you put that together with, I have a degree from one of these places, you put that together with the elitism that's embedded in white male hierarchies and mediocrity, you put that together with all of that, and it's very difficult for anybody who isn't white male or white, period, right? Because white women have made lots of advances in the fields in recent decades. And you could say, well, so black folks, so Latinx folks, et cetera, et cetera. Not so much, right? If you cobbled all the black and brown and indigenous folk teaching at major universities in the United States, I doubt you'd crowd much more than one mid-sized auditorium somewhere. We're not, I mean, most of us who are of color, who are teaching at universities, are not teaching at the elites. Not that no, you should necessarily want to, given how these spaces treat folks like us, right? And that gets to the second part. Even when you do the work, even when you go out and say, okay, I'm going to accept everything that this hierarchy, this gauntlet says I should accept about journal articles, scholarly journal articles, peer review, gold standard, etc., and you go ahead and do it, there's another sort of a leap of elitism that goes with that, and that is where are you publishing these articles, right? So, using myself as an example, Teachers College Record, Journal of Hispanic Higher Education for education fields, Radical Society for stuff that's more related to history. Not exactly high level. Don't get me wrong, they're journal articles. I mean, they're peer reviewed, right? Editors like the pieces, et cetera, right? People cite them sometimes, but that doesn't mean that they're elite. I'm not publishing in the History of Education Quarterly or Harvard Educational Review or the Journal of Negro Education, for which I've been a reviewer for years, or um, American Studies, where I've done reviews in the past, among other places, right? I've been a reviewer for a lot of places, but I haven't, but I haven't necessarily been able to make inroads in that regard. And, after a while, I just said, it's better for me to publish the way I want to publish anyway, which is for more general audience, which is fine with me. So there's that. But for those who do accept the idea of doing that, they still face barriers, right? There was a case in 2019 of Lorgia Garcia Pena at Harvard University's Ethnic Studies Department. She was an endowed chair, associate professor who got not tenured to become a full professor because her scholarship wasn't scholarly enough as far as the people who denied her tenure were concerned. Are you kidding me? But keep in mind, her field's ethnic studies, right? In ethnic studies journals, there might be some hierarchy within the field of ethnic studies, but ethnic studies is not on the same level at most universities, even elite ones, as history departments, um, as English, as other kinds of studies, right? Anthropology, etc. Because ethnic studies is typically an interdisciplinary field. Interdisciplinary work also gets looked down on because you are actually mixing and matching. It's almost like being a mixed genre writer, where you're doing ethnography while simultaneously crunching numbers, kind of things. And you're like, that's too much. That's not how we do scholarship. It's not original enough, et cetera, because you're mixing and matching, right? And so there's so many layers to this bullshit that's known as peer-reviewed scholarly journals, and how it's connected to the gatekeeping around who gets tenure, who doesn't get tenure, who gets hired in the first place, whose contracts aren't renewed, et cetera, et cetera. So when you account for all of it in terms of the elitism, in terms of who gets published where and who doesn't get published where, in terms of who gets hired where and who doesn't get hired, in terms of the fact that the majority of people who do get published in major journals, in fields like history and even education, are people who've come out of the teachers' colleges and UPenn's Graduate School of Educations, and um, or University of Michigan, or UVA or Duke, and some of these other places. Because of that, it makes it very difficult for anybody to survive this process. Not only to get tenure, but even if they get tenure, to basically go pivot and go, you know what? I'm part of the club, but I'm going to shake things up within the club and write the way I want to write. First of all, you haven't been writing the way you wanted to write for a decade or more, right? And so it takes time to rebuild a skill like writing for audiences with feeling, with emotion, with the ability to actually communicate complex ideas to folks who don't typically deal with complex ideas, certainly the way that academicians supposedly deal with complex ideas. We deal with the esoteric, we deal with the vapid, we deal with the very, very narrow a lot of times. And sometimes we deal with complex theories within that process, right? But we don't deal with them in a way that tries to communicate to anybody, not even graduate students, very well. So, to me, the idea that somehow that you're going to be part of the system and then really shake things up as a writer, you can do it as a public intellectual, maybe. Certainly, you can be like Mark Anthony Neal or Mark Lamont Hill or Melissa Harris Perry, or to go into the English writing world and its connections to academia, Roxane Gay or Kiese Layman, and try to shake things up in some respects around that. But it doesn't really change the overall structure of things. These are the exceptions that kind of prove the rule, if anything. So so we have there's so many different layers to this gold standard BS, that you know I decided 7, 8 years ago that after I got my last rejection for a piece I was working on regarding American narcissism and its connections with American racism and vice versa, that you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm already in my mid to late 40s. I'm not getting any younger. I want people to read my stuff to get something out of it, even if it means that no one really recognizes what I've done until well after I'm dead. I'd rather it be out there for the possibility of that than it to be buried in the one or two journals that might one day publish my stuff. So that's my little thing about it. It's depressing as all fuck, to be perfectly honest with you, at some level. Not for me per se, depressing in a general sense, that this is the state of control of the intellectual at universities. And it does us no good as academicians, as higher ed people in general, because there is a whole world out there that doesn't give a shit about all of these rules. They will raid whatever they think is palatable to people in the moment and put it out there and twist it in ways that's never been intended. And y'all are just sitting there, your hands between your knees, going, I don't, and wringing your hands and wringing your brains in the process. Your frontal lobes, you're literally wringing them like this, while trying to figure out what the heck we're supposed to do. So let's run back to 1975 and practice tokenism and only hire people who are just like us. Sounds like a great idea. Beautiful. I wonder why history departments are dying and education fields are struggling, scratching their heads.